Welcome to the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. Tyler R. Tichlaar has a PhD in Literature from Western Michigan University and a bachelor and master's degree in English from Northern Michigan University. He's the owner of Marquette Fiction, his own publishing company, Superior Book Productions, and the former president of UPPAA. He is also considered a local expert on Marquette history and is proud to be a seventh-generation Marquette resident. Tyler began writing his first novel at age 16 in 1987. In 2006, he published his first novel, Iron Pioneers, the Marquette Trilogy, Book 1. In 2008, Tyler won first place in the historical fiction category in the Reader Views Literary Awards for his novel Narrow Lives. In 2011, Tyler was awarded the Marquette County Outstanding Writer Award. And the same year, he received the Barb Kelly Award for Historical Preservation for his efforts to promote Marquette history. Tyler also writes on such diverse topics as 19th century Gothic fiction and historical fantasies about King Arthur. Tyler remains engrossed in writing about Marquette and Upper Michigan as microcosms for the greater American story.
We're at 6:00 p.m. I'm Evelyn Gathu, and welcome all of you tonight to our installment of the UP Notable Books Book Club. We are going to be talking shortly to Tyler Tichlaar about his book, Odin's Eye. And we usually kick off our program with Victor giving us some information about UPPAA. Take it away, Victor.
Thanks, everyone. I am Victor Volkman, the current president of the Upper Peninsula Publishers and Authors Association. And I'm very geeked to announce the UP Reader number 8 is here, which also has a cute little story by Tyler Tichlaar. So if you need more Tyler, we've got it for you. This is the biggest issue ever. It's 100,000 words. It's 3 times as big as the first UP Reader. So I can't promise they're going to be this big again. There's lots of fun stories in there, poetry, a little something for everybody. So makes a great Mother's Day gift. So start ordering your UP readers. The other thing we have to talk about is the spring conference comes but once a year in Marquette, and that is May 18th, 2024. Our Upper Peninsula Publishers and Authors Association will be at the Peter White Library again all Saturday. And it doesn't matter if you've been writing for 10 years or you're just thinking about writing. We want everyone who's interested in writing to come and be with us. We have all kinds of breakouts for people of every type of genre. We have poetry breakouts. We have breakouts on suspense writing and romance and marketing and everything in the whole world of UP writing. So head on over to UPPAA.org and click on Spring Conference. That's UPPAA.org and join us in Marquette. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Victor. And I'm really looking forward to that day because that's also, there's the youth conference happening in conjunction with that. And I know some of the people who are on tonight are even going to be speaking at that conference. So I'm excited. Yes, it's always so good to see all my author friends and reader friends. And it's just a wonderful spring day to talk about this time travel book. It's good timing, Tyler, because my son just had spring break, and I will tell you that it came so early this year, Easter, that it wasn't really great weather, So we branched into great movies of the 1980s, because his mother's ancient and watched all those movies. So we did Adventures in Babysitting and let's see, Kindergarten Cop, and Back to the Future. So of course, I was so glad you even addressed Back to the Future in here because I was happy that I just watched that, because it is like this. And yeah, it's just always great to have you back. But I don't know when I can work this in. Maybe I should just start it off now. I think, Tyler, you are, speaking as an English teacher of 24 years, the biggest plagiarizer I've ever known. You have plagiarized, Tyler Tichlaar has plagiarized himself a million times in this book. It was so fun. Because I think it's legal, really, right? If
it's my book.
it's your books. So, but it was just so great to see you, kind of, just bringing up other books, bringing up yourself, bringing up, yeah, it was like, it could be a whole lesson on plagiarism right here, this book in my hand. So I loved it.
Well, we English professors don't say plagiarism, we call it postmodernism.
Oh, postmodernism.
That's what I consider it.
Yes. Stealing from yourself. Okay. I liked it. I liked it. Without any further chastising from me, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tyler. Tell us about your
Okay.
Odin's Eye.
All right. Well, I have a PowerPoint, so let me just share my screen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about. Oh, it says my screen sharing was disabled by the host.
Try again, please.
Okay. All right, there we go. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about can you see that?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. All right. So I just want to talk a little bit about the background to the book, how I came up with the idea, a little bit of the history behind the book, and then I have some photos, and then we can have discussion and questions. So to start out, first question, why did I decide to write a time travel novel? So as most of you probably know, I have written a whole bunch of historical fiction novels and some nonfiction books of UP Marquette history. And so I just have said over and over to people, I wish I could invent a time travel machine and go back and see what Marquette was like in the past. And I mean, no matter how many books I read, how many pictures I look at, I still don't feel like I can completely understand what it would have been like to live here in, 1900 or 1850. So I thought, well, I can't invent a time travel machine. So the next best thing is to write a time travel novel and pretend. So that's what I decided to do. And as most of you, if you've read other time travel novels, I have to pick what time my characters are going to go back to. So these were some of my thoughts in the process. I thought about what time in Marquette's history would I want to visit? What significant event in the past would I like to change? And what would have to change for that event to change? And so usually in time travel fiction, when the character goes back in time, they either are doing it to try to change something in the past or to try to prevent something from happening in the future by changing something in the past. So, for example, if you want to go back and make sure Adolf Hitler was never born, you could you could stop the Holocaust in World War II. So I thought, what part of Marquette's history would I want to visit? And I've always been drawn more to the 19th turn of the century period than the more modern period, because of course, I was born in 1971, and my parents and grandparents were all born at the beginning of the 20th century. So I kind of feel like I know that period pretty well. So I want to go back to the 19th century. So I tried to think of an event I wanted to change, and I thought of several events in the past that were significant in Marquette's history. The first one I thought about was the 1868 fire. The whole city of Marquette, the whole downtown area burned down in 1868. And I thought, well, that's probably the biggest event in Marquette's past. But as I thought about that, I thought, well, I don't know that I want to change that, because that event really led to the restructuring of Marquette and the city code, saying that all the buildings downtown had to be built of sandstone or of brick or some sort of stone, so they wouldn't burn down. And that really led to all of this wonderful sandstone architecture that Marquette has. So I thought, okay, sometimes bad things turn into good things, so I don't want to reverse that event. So I finally decided one thing I wanted to keep was the Longyear Mansion. The Longyear Mansion was the biggest house Marquette ever saw, and it was moved away. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if the Longyear Mansion was still in Marquette today? And so I thought, well, how do I go about and stop the Longyear Mansion from being moved? And so I'll tell you a little bit about the background of the Longyear Mansion. If you've read the novel, you know some of this, but you may not know what happened that didn't show up in the novel because I stopped it from happening. So the Longyear Mansion was built by John Monroe and Mary Beecher Longyear. Mr. Longyear was what was called a land looker. He came up to Marquette in 1871, and he was basically involved in forestry, logging, buying up a lot of property. Eventually, he became one of the richest men in Michigan. He owned up to 3% of the state of Michigan at one point. And he and his wife had a family of several children, and they bought a house in Marquette, which is considered the Swineford home. It belonged to the Mining Journal's owner. And if you've seen the Swineford home, it's an enormous house. It's probably the biggest older house in Marquette today. And that house was not big enough for the Longyears. So they decided to build a whole addition to the house. And even while they built the addition, it still wasn't big enough. So they decided to build what became known as the Longyear Mansion in Marquette. It was built, the official address of the Longyear Mansion is 536 East Arch Street, but it actually encompassed the entire block between Ridge Street and Arch Street and from Cedar to Lakeshore Boulevard. It was built from 1890 to 92, so 2 years it took to build it. It had 65 rooms, including a bowling alley. It used $500,000 worth of raindrop sandstone from the Jacobs Quarry, which today would be, many, many millions of dollars. The architect was D. Frederick Charlton, who was he was an immigrant from England who had come to the United States to become an architect. And eventually he came up to Marquette working for another company, and then he started his own architecture firm here in Marquette. And the Longyear Mansion is one of the best known buildings that he built, but he did many others. The Marquette County Courthouse was one of Charlton's structures. He did the Newberry Insane Asylum. He did the Marquette Branch Prison. He did many schools throughout the UP, a lot of houses, lots of civic buildings. There's actually a wonderful book written about him called Architectural Missionary. It came out a few years ago, and there's actually a review of it that I wrote at the UP Book Review, if you're interested. And it lists all the buildings that Mr. Charlton built in the UP. So he was a very well-known architect in his day. And then the landscaper was Frederick Law Olmsted, who is best known for being the designer of Central Park in New York City. But he did parks all over the United States. And when he came up here to do the Longyear Mansion, he laid out the plans for the gardens and the grounds at the mansion. And Peter White, who was one of the other prominent Marquette businessmen, asked him to go out and also do the landscaping for Presque Park. And Frederick Law Olmsted went out there and said, no, the park is perfect. Leave it as it is. The only thing he did was have the road, plan out the road to go around the island. So those are two very prominent people that were hired to do the Longyear Mansion. And I think it's also an interesting fact that it was the first home in Marquette to use electric Christmas lights. Electricity was very new at that point. And I think I would just love to be inside that house and see those Christmas lights that first Christmas morning in 1892. Can you imagine what that would have been like? The first time you ever saw Christmas lights. So I thought, we got to keep it. And here's some pictures of the interior of the house. This was the main entrance, the front hall. There were several like drawing rooms, sitting rooms, music room, an octagonal hallway in the middle of the building. And I'll show you some outside pictures in a minute, but this is the main entrance hall. And you can see it's very Victorian, very ornate. And then these next 4 pictures are all the drawing room, but they're taken from different views of the drawing room. So you can see how fancy, the sofa was. It's got a picture on it. All this wallpaper, cloth wallpaper hanging up here. The curtains with the designs on the windows. So that's the north view of the drawing room. Here's the west view of the drawing room. And then we have, you can see the chandelier here, for example, and all these paintings. Here's the southeast view of the drawing room. And they just have all these little tables and all these chairs. And I mean, I don't know how big it actually was, but it must have been huge to, to hold all these people. Imagine all these curtains. I just think, how much dust there would be on there and all the, how much work it would have been for all the servants to clean it. And then we come to Howard Longyear. And Howard is the reason why the Longyear mansion actually moved. Howard was born 1882, and as you can see, he died in 1900. And if you read the book, he did actually die. This picture on the right is Howard when he was about 15 years old, so about 1897. And then the picture on the left would have been taken about 1900. He is wearing a shirt that says 1903 on it because he had gone to Cornell University and he was a freshman. And 1903 would have been the year that he graduated. So he was part of the class of 1903, even though he never actually graduated. And so what basically happened is Howard went off to Cornell University, his freshman year of college, and then he came home. And his parents were up at the Huron Mountain Club up just north of Big Bay on Lake Superior. If you don't know anything about the Huron Mountain Club, it's a very exclusive club in the UP. Only very wealthy people live up there. They have what are called cottages, but their cottages are as big or bigger than most people's houses. And so the Longyears had a cottage up at the Huron Mountain Club. And Howard came home while his family was up there from college. And so he decided he and his friend, Hugh Allen, were going to canoe up to the Huron Mountain Club on July 7th. And so they got all their supplies to go up there. He was bringing with him, he had some flowers he was going to bring his mom, and they had some other things they were carrying up there. And they got in the canoe and they headed off from the harbor in Marquette, downtown's Iron Bay. And they started out on Lake Superior, made it up to Presque Isle Park, were seen by people going around the breakwater. People waved at them and they waved back. And some people actually thought that they were Native Americans because they were in a canoe. So that was the last time they were sighted. And then as they went around Presque Isle Park, they hit some bad weather, some waves or some squalls in the water. No one's exactly sure what. But whatever it was, it caused their canoe to tip over. They both drowned, and their bodies were found several days later. They were somewhere probably around where the Black Rocks are on Presque Isle Park when they capsized. The Longyears were completely devastated, and Mr. and Mrs. Longyear walked all the way back from the Huron Mountain Club to Marquette along the lakeshore looking for the bodies. Hugh Allen's father, he was in the boat when they actually found Hugh's body buried in Lake Superior. And so they brought the bodies back to Marquette and they buried them. And Hugh is buried in the cemetery. He's very close to where the Breiting Mausoleum is, if you know it, if you are familiar with Park Cemetery. He's buried there with his father. And then Howard Longyear is buried in Park Cemetery, but I don't know where because there is no marked grave for Howard Longyear, which I find just completely fascinating because his parents had oodles of money. I just can't imagine why they would not have put a marker for him. But they were Christian Scientists, and that may have had something to do with it. They didn't really focus on the body being on the whole idea of death. They were more spiritually minded and figured he would live again. And so his physical body may not have been as important to the family. So here's a picture of the Longyear family. This is Howard over here on the left. And this is his mother with the striped blouse on. And then his two sisters, Helen and Abby, and their dog. Oh, I forget the dog's name. But they had a dog. And I had to cut the dog out of the book. I didn't know what to do with him, but they did have a dog. And then this is another sister and his younger brother. And this is his mother's sister and her children who actually stayed with the family sometimes. And so this is the view of the house from the veranda in the front. And you can see down here in the background, like there's a smokestack in what would be Lake Superior. So they would have a view of the harbor from there. And then this is a picture of their cabin that was at the Huron Mountain Club. Now, this is where they would have been probably staying when they heard the news of Howard's death. But they also owned property at Ives Lake, which at that point was not part of the Huron Mountain Club, but later was incorporated into it. And later, they would build several buildings over at Ives Lake, which are probably better known as the Longyear's property than this cabin is. So, well, let me wait till I get to there. So after Howard died, Mrs. Longyear was just very, very distraught. He was her absolute favorite child. She was just completely enamored with him, and she was very overprotective towards him also, I would say. There's a book that was published after his death called The Unfolding Life, which was a collection of his letters and diary entries and letters from friends. And he would let her read his diaries, and he would write things in his diaries like, I am proud to say I have no impure thoughts about girls, things along those lines. And of course, his mother's reading the diary. So I'm pretty sure that, he's smart enough to not put anything in there that she's not going to like. But she was his favorite. He could do absolutely no wrong. There's a recording at the Marquette Regional History Center of his sister Abby after he died. Well, actually recorded in the 1970s, where she talks about after he died, how upset her mother was, and how he was the favorite, and how the rest of the children in the family were just basically nothing more than baggage compared to Howard, the ideal son. And she also says that Mrs. Longyear would have had a really hard time if Howard had lived, because a few years after that, when he got into his 20s or so, he would have wanted to think about getting married, and she would not have done well with having to share him with a daughter-in-law. And that kind of triggered some of my thoughts in writing the novel. Like, how come poor Howard had to drown and never got to be married? So that was one of the things I played with in the novel, that if he lived, what would his life have been like? So Mrs. Longyear loved her son so much that she decided she wanted to build a park, the Howard Memorial Park, in his honor. And she made all these elaborate plans to build the park. It was going to be just at the bottom of the hill on Ridge Street and along Lakeshore Boulevard, where today the Maritime Museum and the City Waterworks buildings are. So she wanted to buy up that property and donate it all to the city of Marquette as a park. But unfortunately, the railroad wanted to run its tracks through that property. And the city decided in favor of the railroad. And when Mrs. Longyear heard that, she was so furious that she said she would never set foot in Marquette again. So Mr. and Mrs. Longyear, they decided, they were going to leave Marquette. They were going to sell their house. They tried to sell it. They couldn't find anybody to buy it, because how many people can afford a 65-room sandstone mansion with a bowling alley in it? So they had gone to Europe, and the story is that they were riding down the Champs-Elysees when Mr. Longyear turned to his wife and said, well, why don't we just move the house? And I think he was probably maybe half joking or totally joking, but she thought that was a great idea. And so that's what they decided to do. And so the move began for the house. And here's some facts about the moving of the house. They started dismantling it in January 1903. And by July, it began being rebuilt in Brookline, Massachusetts. They chose Brookline because Mr. Longyear had business interests out in Massachusetts. It's a suburb of Boston. And also, as I said, Mrs. Longyear was a Christian Scientist, and Boston was the head of the Christian Science Church. And at that point, Mary Baker Eddy, the founder, was still alive. And Mrs. Longyear actually became kind of obsessed with Mary Baker Eddy, and she went around. Mary Baker Eddy had lived in numerous houses over the course of her life. And so Mrs. Longyear went out and started buying up every house that Mary Baker Eddy ever owned to make into this like museum property for the Christian Science Church. So that was part of the reason to choose Massachusetts as the place for the home. It took 190 railroad cars to move the house. And the process consisted of every single stone being, the house being taken apart, every stone cleaned, numbered, wrapped in straw. And then it would have to, the whole process would have to be undone when it got to Brookline. When they got the house to Brookline, they called in the firm of Frederick Law Olmsted to do the landscaping again. And either he or his son, there's a little bit of confusion about this, but the firm anyway said, you know what? Your house isn't going to look right on this property because the property, the land and everything is different than what it was in Marquette. So they decided once the house got there, they were going to completely remodel and rearrange the layout of the house. And by the time they finished that and they added onto the house, it went from 65 rooms in Marquette to 100 rooms in Brookline, Massachusetts. And this is my own personal story. My great-great-grandfather, William Forrest McCumbee, he was a carpenter in Marquette, and he was one of the people that was hired to help take apart the Longyear Mansion. And so he was working there, and his daughter, my great-grandmother, Barbara McCumbee White, she would have been about 18 at the time the house was being taken apart. She told her father that she just really, really wanted to see the inside of the mansion before it was dismantled. And so he told her, well, why don't you bring me my lunch one day at lunchtime? And at that point, everybody else will be gone off to lunch. There won't be many people around. So I'll let you walk around the house during lunch break. So she did. She brought him his lunch and he told her, go ahead and look around, but be back at a certain time. And so he ate his lunch and then he waited for her. And the time came when she was supposed to be back and she didn't come and she didn't come. And finally, she came back and he said, well, why weren't you back when you were supposed to be back? And she said, well, I got lost. I couldn't find my way back. So you can just kind of imagine 65 rooms, how hard it was for her to find her way back. So that's my little connection to the Longyear Mansion. And so these are, I might have missed a slide here. Did I show one of the front of the house? Well, yeah, here, this is the front of the mansion here. So this is what it looked like in Marquette. This road here, this drive is the drive off of Arch Street, the main entrance. Going up to, you can kind of see this building here. There's an arch here. And so they would drive under there and then you could get out of your car so you wouldn't get wet under this little arch and go into the house. So when they moved it to Brookline, I found some pictures online of what the house looks like now. So these were taken circa 1917, and you can see that it's very much less ornate. It's much square, less Victorian, more early 20th century style, the way that they remodeled the front of it. Even so, it wasn't there that long. All this ivy and stuff is growing up on it by about 1917. And here's a picture in color of one aspect of it. And of course, the swimming pool. It was it belonged to the Longyears until Mr. Longyear died in 1921, and then he left it to his wife. And then when she died in I think it was 1937, she left the house to the Christian Science Church. And her children were not happy about that. They contested the will, but the church ended up keeping the house. and they turned it into a museum to the Christian Science faith. And you could go and you could actually tour through the house and see the museum for many years up until about the 90s. And since then, if you like old TV shows, it was even in an episode of the 19, I think it was 1985, the TV show Spencer for Hire. So you can see it in that show. But after that, it was turned into condominiums, and that's what it is today. And I'm sure that this swimming pool was since put into for the condominiums residents. So just a couple of other facts from the book. This is the picture of the dolmen that is featured in the novel. It's up at the Hero Mountain Club, and it kind of helped to inspire not just the time travel aspect of the book, but also the title of the book. Nobody knows why the dolmen is there or who placed it there. And so in the book, I theorized that, possibly the Vikings, Fred Reedholm, who was a Marquette mayor and a school teacher and an author of a book, Superior Heartland, and then another book, Michigan Copper. He theorized that it was possible the Vikings came into the Great Lakes to trade, probably to get copper from Isle Royal, possibly. There was a big copper trade off of Isle Royal in ancient times, which we don't know a whole lot about, but Fred Reedholm was convinced that there was way more copper in the old world in Europe and Africa and Asia than could possibly have been found there. So a lot of it had to have come from Isle Royal and Upper Michigan. So it's possible the dolmen was placed there as some sort of marker to people as they were going along Lake Superior to let them know they were going in the right direction. It's possible it's some sort of a grave, although it's on very firm stone beneath it. So I'm kind of doubtful that it's a grave. So we just don't know. But Odin, of course, is the Norse, one of the Norse gods. And so I named the book for him. And Odin's eye specifically because in Norse mythology, the god Odin, he was the father of the gods. And he agreed that he would give up one of his eyes in exchange for having all knowledge. And so I played on that with the idea that the time travel device that's discovered in the book could possibly be of Viking origin. And it's called Odin's Eye because it allows people to view other times. So I don't want to give too much away of the plot in case you haven't read the book, but that was kind of some of my thinking with the dolmen at the Hero Mountain Club. And so I will stop there. I wrote some discussion questions just kind of to trigger discussion. So if you want to talk about any of these, who was your favorite character? Did you agree with the character's decisions about which time they wanted to live in? Which version of Marquette in the novel would you want to live in? What was your favorite scene? If you were one of the characters, what would you have done differently? So I will stop there and take questions. I'll go back. I'll remove the screen sharing here.
Well, thank you, Tyler. That was a great, nice pictures. I was one of the questions I had was, what does it look like now? Is it still around now? But yeah, does anyone have any of the topics they wanted to ask that, Tyler wants us to discuss, or even a different question?
Yeah, any questions are welcome.
Oh, it looks like Mary's got a hand up.
I have a different question. I just wanted to comment because I'm currently writing a time travel book
Cool.
about some current people going back to the time of the Irish potato famine because I had ancestors involved in that. And I really found that the little comments that you had in there from the Irish people, like how much they hated the English. I'm like, yeah, and I know why. So that was just, but the whole idea of different timelines, that's something that I've played with a lot in my books too. So I really enjoyed seeing how you did it.
No, thank you. Yeah, that was hard to figure out, to keep track of the different lines. And what would change as they went from one timeline to the next.
Yeah. I also really liked what you did with I want to call him John instead of Neil. Neil's friend, the guy that ended up working in the woods.
Oh, Derek.
Derek, yeah, that was really neat how he ended up in a time that fit him better than the one he was in. That's another idea I play with sometimes too.
Great. Well, let me know when your book is out. I want to read it.
Well, I have one already out that's based on my German ancestors, and it's on Amazon. It's called Voices in the Past. So,
Okay.
yeah, if you're interested in that. And then this one is hopefully going to be a follow-up or a partner on my Irish side.
Mary, if you can put those titles in an email to me, then when I send like the recap, then people will have them if they wanted to kind of purchase them on Amazon.
Okay. All right. Yeah, actually, and I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be passing through Crystal Falls on May 2nd.
Oh,
So I'm going to
okay.
stop and see you at the library, I hope.
Person, I know we've been Zoom friends for years, so that'll be fun.
I know, I'm looking forward. Last year it all fell apart, so this year I'm hoping this time.
Great.
Yep.
All right. See, Deborah over there's got a question.
Well, more of a comment. I really liked, Tyler, what you did with most of the time when we have time travel, the characters who are doing the time travel are trying not to be seen, not to have an impact or change history in any way because of the possible consequences. And here your characters were intentionally trying to put things back the way they were. And I also liked the conflict that gave your main character of, oh, if I put it back the way it was supposed to be, then I don't exist. And that was a really good inner conflict for your characters to have. I enjoyed that portion of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I like inner conflict. I like my characters have lots of angst. So
Okay, how about Charlene? And before she asks her question, I want you all to know that this lovely lady next to me turned 77 today.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Monday.
Thank you. Well, okay, but the first time this appears is on page 43. You've got like a smudge, and I'm not sure if it's because I've got cataracts, but it looked to me like a smudge, and I thought, well, what the hell is that? And then it keeps occurring, and then I see now the first time I've seen the dolmen was today that you had a picture of that rock, and I believe that's what.
Yeah, it's the dolmen.
Yeah.
So now I know you don't even have to answer it, but was that to signify something when we were reading it? Because it doesn't always occur, just once in a while.
It's a scene break, Mark, between the scenes. Instead of just little dots or whatever, it's a scene break.
Okay. Yeah, well, that got cleared up already.
I figured it out when I was reading, but I wished it was a little bit darker. Because you had to kind of,
Okay.
you know.
Okay. Might be the printing. I mean, you never know with the printers, but I'll see if I can get darkened before I reprint.
You can just about see the outline of it now.
Okay.
You got it? I think. Oh, Anne's got a question. All right, Anne.
Well, I really admire and respect you as a historian and a researcher. In the process of writing this book, did you discover something or learn something that really surprised you that you hadn't been aware of before?
I think so, but now I'm kind of blanking on I mean, most of the research that I did for the book was more to try to imagine like what it would be like to live in 1900. So I spent a lot of time doing things like trying to figure out, you know, what kind of toothpaste would they have? What kind of razor would they use? What would the men's underwear be like? Like John is very comfortable in his underwear, you know, those kinds of things. And so looking up pictures and catalogs and just trying to envision those things and the things that would make me uncomfortable, you know, like would they have a bathroom with running water? How do you survive without a flush toilet and a shower and those sorts of things, and what was comfortable and what wasn't comfortable. So I don't think I would want to live back then. I mean, I would love to go back and see it. And I think in some ways life was better then. We tend to have a view of nostalgia of the past. I think it was a simpler time in many ways, but I know myself that I would die of heat exhaustion in the first week. If I had to live in the summer in the Victorian period and wear suits and long sleeve shirts, there was in 1908, the book I'm writing right now is set in 1908. And in 1908, there was a day when the temperature in Marquette hit something like 102. And it made the newspaper that it was so hot that men were walking around in their shirt sleeves. And I thought, what? None of them are wearing shorts?
Oh my gosh.
No t-shirts? I mean, I would die of heat exhaustion. So that was probably the biggest thing for me, is just, really imagining what it would be like to live day to day in 1900.
Thank you.
Oh, we have a question coming in before we get to. I see you, Wade. You're next. But Jennifer McGraw wants to know.
No, Jennifer, I'm sorry. I wish I was related to Peter White. There were two White families in Marquette, my family and Peter White's family. They both came here close to the same time, but no, we're no relation at all. We both families came from New York too, and I have done the genealogy of Peter White and my family. My great aunts insisted that Peter White's eyes were the same as my great grandfather's eyes, but there is no blood connection between us. Just a coincidence that we both were named White.
And before you jump into that Viking question, because that's a good one, how about Wade's question?
Oh, well, hi, Tyler.
Hello.
Not really a question again, but more of a comment. So as you know, I did write a review for Odin's Eye. And at the time I was trying to articulate all my thoughts about it. And so this is a little bit more of an extension on that without giving any spoilers away, of course, for anyone who hasn't read it. But one thing that really struck me about it was the structure, which is, when I started reading it, I'm thinking, okay, this is about a guy who's gone back in time and has amnesia. But then there's more layers and more layers and more layers, and then you get into the mythology of the Odin's Eye, and it kind of brings all these different things from time travel lore together, and then really pays off in that end. So I really that's the one thing that I didn't mention in my review, but I really liked how you kind of took all these different time travel lore pieces and put them all together into this really, really nice wrap up story at the end of it.
Thank you. Yeah, my biggest concern was people would think that I was stealing from other time travel stories, but at the same time, I thought, my characters will have. I mean, if I've seen Back to the Future, my characters are going to have seen Back to the Future. If I read a Connecticut Yankee, they're probably going to have read a Connecticut Yankee. So it's just natural that they would, to solve their own time travel problem, they would be drawing upon what time travel literature and films they'd already seen.
Mm-hmm.
So that just kind of affected the whole storyline.
Good. Do you think Jennifer wants to know about the Vikings? Do you think they were here in the UP? Mm-hmm.
I am not an expert on the Vikings, so I have absolutely no idea if they were here or not, but I think I guess I would say I think it's plausible. I have not read anything that has completely convinced me that they have been here. I know that there are some claims of things like a rune stone that was discovered in Minnesota from, the medieval period, which I think was probably faked. I read a book about it, and I think it was probably faked. There was a lot of people around the late 1800s, early 1900s of Scandinavian descent who wanted to believe the Vikings were here, and were kind of using that as their way of softening their own guilt about taking over Native Americans' lands by trying to claim that, hey, we were here first, or we were here when they were here anyway. So I think there's a lot of mythology about the Vikings having been here. I can't say for sure if they were or not. And it's very possible that dolmen was put there, by the Native Americans or by some people. We have absolutely no idea. were here. I mean, like I said, there was copper being mined at Isle Royale in ancient times, and the Native Americans, like the Ojibwa and the Sioux, who would have been in this area about the time that white Europeans first came, they said they knew nothing about these older people that were doing this mining. So who knows? You know, they could have been aliens from outer space that put it there. I don't know. I'm open-minded about it, but I don't have a solution. I want to think King Arthur. You know, I mean, I read the Prince Valiant comics, and Prince Valiant comes with King Arthur, you know, down the St. Lawrence Seaway. So it could be him. There are legends that King Arthur actually came to Welsh legends that King Arthur came to North America. So who knows?
Okay. In the Viking poll, they also mentioned that was the last book that we read, and that they had the hieroglyphics on that mountain where the monster was living. So that kind of seemed like a little bit of evidence of them being around, you know, the Vikings being around. Or
Yeah, well, I would say read Fred Reedholm's book, Michigan Copper. He has a lot of stuff in there about the copper industry and the possibilities. And I don't necessarily know that I buy it, but I'm fascinated by it. So it's not it doesn't hurt to think about it.
yeah.
Mhm. I wanted to know, who are Derek and Allison? I mean, I mean, I thought maybe we'd see them on here tonight. Are they people? Are they friends?
No,
Are they
no,
composites?
they're all fictional,
Mm.
completely fictional.
Hmm. Yeah, they were fun. They were good characters, and I liked the way that they changed. I think it was, you know, it surprised me. It surprised Neil, and that was a believable, you know, part of the book, I think.
Well, I will say, if you've read my earlier books, the Marquette trilogy,
Mhm.
in Superior Heritage, the third book, Neil's father is John, and John is the main character of the last half of Superior Heritage. John is based on me. Now, I'm not married, I don't have any kids, but I often think, you know, if I had gotten married, if I had a kid, you know, it's a nice way to wrap up a novel with a love story. So I gave John a wife at the end of Superior Heritage. And of course, in progressive books, The Best Place, and now this book, John and Wendy have children, and so that's I'm John for the most part. He's kind of loosely based on me, but the rest is all fictional. Kind of my parallel life. Writing these novels is like my parallel universe life of if I had had children, this is what would happen.
I don't know, I should probably let someone else talk, but I hope you all are going to get a little bit freaked out by this discovery. So, I don't know how many of you have your books with you, but I had an English teacher long time ago when I was in high school, and he taught us, he said, every time you finish a book, you have to read the first word of the book and the last word of the book. And he said, you will be amazed how often that will that will summarize the whole book. And do you know what your first and last words?
Oh, no, I don't remember.
Can I tell you?
Yes.
They are first way. And I think that's so cool because he was trying to find the first way back, like the way, you know, not these other universes.
Okay.
The first way. He was trying to get the first way. And I thought, whoa, you know, when I read that, I was like, wow. So it was kind of fun to share that.
You know, the whole book could be a code about how to do time travel, and we just haven't broken the code yet. I'm saying it could be. I'm not saying it is.
Yeah, but I thought that was really something because they was just, you know, he was just searching and searching, and he found all those other ways, but to get the first way, to get the time travel to be the way the first time he did it. So I thought that was
Yeah.
kind of,
Uncle Chad would have wanted it that way.
yeah.
Yeah. And Uncle Chad is my brother that died. So that's fiction. I mean, that's based in reality too.
Mhm.
My brother's apartment actually was on the property where the Longyear Mansion stood.
Oh,
And if you read last year's UP Reader, there's a story in there called Victoria Nightmare, which is about Chad.
Hmm, okay.
Want a little more information about him.
I'll have to check that out. Has a question. Or she had her hand up. Sue? Oh, she's muted. Sue, can you unmute?
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yeah.
All right, sorry. I have to bring up that part about the future. I just love that. And where the whole city was flooded. Oh my goodness. It was just, it was so, when I first, it was like, I had the shock of going into this other world. And it mirrored what the characters must have felt as they went into these other worlds. And at first I thought, wait, no, this doesn't fit. The more I got into it, the more I realized it fits wonderfully well. But it was like it was all about the drowning in so many ways. You just had this terrific presentation right in the middle of the novel that was all about the metaphor of the drowning. And I'm like, holy cow, this is just fantastic. I had to put that in.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, when I wrote the book, before I even thought about writing a time travel novel, I had thought about writing a short story about Marquette underwater. And that's really the first piece that was in my head for the book. And when I was writing the book, I have some friends that are my beta readers that I send the drafts to as they get written. And one of them was like, that whole future thing, take that out. It just stretches out the book too much, doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. But I was just like not gonna cut it. I just thought, the shock of seeing those towers rising up from St. Peter's. And so I had to put a photo in the book. I mean, I just thought, that's just a great visual moment. But I struggled with it. I didn't feel like that scene really worked that well. And initially they found the time travel device and went back to 1900. But I was kind of stuck on how to end the book, and I wrote an ending I didn't like. And I was trying to make it more, all the pieces cohesive. And so I have to thank Brandy, who's on here tonight. I talked to her about it because she edits science fiction books. And she said, well, what if they found something in the future like Howard's Journal? And so that really helped me tie the whole thing together and make the part of how they get back to the right time more feasible by having that. So I think the future part did work in the end.
It did. It did. At least for me, it did. Yeah.
Thank you.
What do you have? What are you working on now, Tyler? I know it's something, maybe many things.
Another historical novel. Like I said, it's going to be set in 1908 in Marquette. And I don't want to say too much. I don't like to say too much until I know I'm going to pull it off, but it's going to be, it has a mystery element to it. It's not a traditional like detective fiction, but there's a lot of mystery involved. So probably another year or so before I get it done, but it's well underway.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, I don't know, those of you in the audience, if you haven't read the Marquette trilogy, how many of you have read the Marquette trilogy? Oh my gosh. That's it. Turn off the computer, go to your go to your bookstore right now. That's how we met Tyler years ago. My mom, he had in the first segment of the trilogy, and she bought it for me for a Christmas present.
Yeah.
But it was used when I got it.
Yes.
Because she read it the whole time.
Well, it was at the Dome. I don't know if but it was at the, and there was
Christmas show.
There was a few other authors there too. One guy had his was about chips or something.
The Christmas chip, the Christmas tree chip. Yeah.
But you were there, and for these other authors, they would have to, send you the book, or you paid for it or whatever. And you had everything right, Tyler. You had your books, and your books were there. They were already there. And I bought a copy, and I went home and I stayed up all night and read it before I came to Evelyn.
But it was like when I got the trilogy, you know, because of course I read that one,
Yeah.
and then
was a
I don't know
couple
if it was like the
years.
second one or the third. I mean, same thing. Couldn't put him down.
Yeah.
And you know, all of you out there, I mean,
Yes.
I taught English for 24 years. I've been a librarian for 5. I've read a lot of books. These are
And
great books.
especially if you're from Marquette, because
Yeah.
there's so much history. I mean, you go to Peter White's wedding, for God's it's really great.
They're really great. And if you liked this at all, you know, you should really read that trilogy because it kind of goes
Yes. Yeah. There's people
perfectly.
that
You
go
know.
back
Well,
and
a lot of the characters are the same, yeah. And like Mary Frances was talking about the immigrants. The Iron Pioneers is about the immigrants coming to Marquette, and like Molly in Odin's Eye is telling him about her Irish roots. Well, her story is told in Iron Pioneers. And the Germans and the Irish both coming.
Yeah.
So
Well,
really wonderful book.
I raised my hand, not that you can see it, but I did read the book. I really enjoyed it a lot. I was a little leery at first because time travel, do I really want to read about it? It's a great book. Read it.
Thank you.
The one thing I really liked is he spent some of his time going back and talking to his ancestors and getting the answers to the questions that his family didn't know and couldn't find in research. That's something I'd be interested in.
Yeah, that would be my number one reason to have a time machine. Like, I don't know where my great-grandfather was born. I don't know who his parents were. It's driving me nuts. I've tried for years and years to find it. The rest of my family, I've got, you know, back to the Middle Ages and farther back than that. If you trust some of the fake genealogies that were made in the Middle Ages, I can trace myself back to Adam and Eve and also back to Odin. I'm a descendant of the Norse god Odin. Through the kings of England, no less. But I mean, a time machine to go back and read and meet your ancestors would just be absolutely incredible.
I say amen to that for sure. Yeah.
And you don't, you know, you just learn to appreciate. Like I have in there the characters. He notices mannerisms that, you know, maybe his great grandmother has, and he realizes that those are the same mannerisms like his daughter has or his brother has or whatever. And you realize that's where they're from. And even though I talk about how much the Irish hate the English, I mean, in the end, like I myself, I know that I am Irish, English, Scottish, Welsh, Dutch, German, French, and Swiss and Belgian. So, I mean, whose side am I supposed to take? The French or the English or the Scots or the English or you know, I mean, I'm descended from them all. They're all my ancestors. And I wouldn't be here today if one of them didn't live. And there were millions of them. So I'm a little obsessed about genealogy.
Yeah, my big question is why my great grandfather, who came during the famine, ended up marrying an English woman who was a descendant of early pioneers, of early settlers in America. Maybe because she wasn't in England during the famine.
Yeah. Any other final comments or questions, or even, I know there's a lot of people I can't see, but if they wanted to say anything, now's your chance.
Well, one other thing that I had thought of is that being that I'm a Southerner from Iron Mountain, our Marquette history isn't as familiar to me, other than I do know Peter White has a great library. But what I think happened in the book is that you were able to take these local historical personalities and turn them into good characters that even if you don't know, like me, like you don't know about Marquette history as good as you or anyone actually in Marquette does, they still stand on their own as characters. The Peter White, the long years, how he wrote them. I mean, they could have been fictional characters in that regard.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and Nina's asking if I've traveled to Europe. Yes, I've been to the British Isles twice. I've been to France, through the Alps, to Turkey, and also to Romania in quest of Dracula.
Right.
Mm.
Shelley's got a final comment or one of our final questions.
It's a comment. I really enjoyed because I'm in Marquette a lot, I really enjoyed the feeling like I was right there. The accuracy of where things are, the streets, the park cemetery, which at one point when I was working in Marquette, I used to go to the cemetery in the afternoon and have my lunch there because it is a peaceful place. So I just really enjoyed that part of it. It felt very much like I knew everywhere I was. The only thing that really surprised me is I did not realize that there had been a bank where Vast is. I don't remember that at all. So it was like I just kept thinking, well, you're talking about the corner of Washington in front, I think, which is the bank that we're all familiar with. And it was like, no, later in the book, it was like, no, it's over a block. Because I couldn't figure out how that bank got across the street from Getz's. But so history to be learned.
Yeah,
But I
that was
really
Peter White's
enjoyed the book.
first bank. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
I didn't
the
have
one on Washington in front, Louis Kaufman built in the 20s.
Yeah, well, that was all new to me. But again, I've been past them hundreds of times, and just so it was amazing to read. I love Ridge Street for the homes that are on it. A lot of mini mansions. I just, those are some of my best places to get away and drive sometimes, or walk. So I really appreciated that. Your question about favorite character, and you know what? I don't think I had one. I was thinking very heavily about that. And it's like, no, I found some value in all of the characters in the book. Even the crabby lady that I can't think of her name right now, that shut the door and told him to get out.
Carolina Smith.
Yes, that one.
She's one of the main characters in my next book, so watch out.
Well, I found humor with her. So it's like, as I think about who's my favorite character, I don't know. They were all characters, that's for sure. And I am going to look for the trilogy books because that does sound like something I might find interesting. Thank you.
Are you retired? I mean, do you have to work in the morning? You got to give yourself some time because you're not going to put them down.
I'm mostly retired. I just have a couple of days a week that I do some private practice work, so I can fit a lot of reading around that.
You'll love it. I love that trilogy. I mean, I like Tyler's writing, but the trilogy it's just such a good starting spot because he goes back to it.
Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah, and like Wade was saying, a lot of the historical people are in it. Like Peter White is one of the characters in the trilogy, and the Harlows make an appearance. Some of the other early Marquette people.
And you don't have to, and I'm from Marquette. Like, I think just as a Upper Peninsula person, it's to read the trilogy because it's just there's a lot there.
Yeah, and I'm actually acquainted with Fred Reedholm Jr. I knew Fred Reedholm is the actual father, but I also know his son and his wife. And yeah, there's another good historian for the Marquette or the UP in general. And a good storyteller he was, especially orally. Oh my God, the man was wonderful to listen to. Could listen to him for hours. So sad to lose those kinds of people. Thank you.
Comments? Thank you, Shelley. Anybody else? Comments?
Thank you.
We're going to meet back up here on May 9th, which is a Thursday, and this will be a bit of a departure from the last few books. We're going into nonfiction. We're going to be reading UPPAA Trails just in time for your summer trips. You'll know where to drink in the UP. So should be fun. And Tyler, as always, thank you very much. And coming up next month, Victor, we'll see you, and a lot of us will be getting together there at the conference. And we can. Is it on Amazon now? The new, the UP reader.
Yep, paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook is on its way. Sort of.
Okay, so we'll be buying one tomorrow morning for the library because those go all the time. So. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and thank you, Tyler, for writing such a fun.
Thank you.
It was nice.
Thank you very much.
It was nice.
Great. You're a great audience. Thank you.
You've been watching the UP Notable Books Club, brought to you by the Upper Peninsula Publisher and Authors Association. To join or for more information, please visit us at www.upaa.org or www.upnotable.com.